Hi everybody, how are you today? I hope everything's great. I chose a book today that I thought about because of how beautiful the weather has been lately. I think we're finally really in spring. If you look out my window, you can see that I can see out the window again. I can see trees and rocks and even some dirt, and the snow has melted down so it's below blocking the window, which is a great thing for me. I picked a book called Marshmallow, and I picked it because of the springtime and also because we've been talking about friends, and sometimes you make a friend instantly when you meet them and you become the closest of friends from the get-go. Other times it takes a little bit of time to get to know your friends before you realize how great they can be. And so that's what I think about when I think about this story, Marshmallow, is sometimes when you make friends, it's a process. It takes a little bit of time, and it's always worth it because making new friends is one of the greatest things about life, right? So this is called Marshmallow. The story and the pictures are by Claire Turley Newberry. Marshmallow. Oliver was a cat. He was middle-aged, gray, with tabby markings. He was a bachelor, without wife or kittens. That's what bachelor means. It means he just lives by himself. And he lived in an apartment in Manhattan, which is New York, very far from Mammoth. A housekeeper, Miss Tilly, who had been with him since kittenhood, looked after the place and prepared his meals. Many a cat has to catch his dinner before he can eat it, but Oliver was lucky. When he was hungry, all he had to do was mention the fact to Miss Tilly, and she would open the refrigerator and get out his liver or chopped beef. Peace and quiet was what he wanted. As Oliver never went out, he didn't know that the world was full of other animals. How could he, when he had never met any of them, socially or otherwise? The only mice in his life were the gray flannelette ones filled with catnip that he received at Christmas. So he only knew mice as toys, not real mice. And the nearest thing to a rabbit he had ever seen was a stuffed plush Easter bunny that had been given to Miss Tilly with a box of candy. So he had seen a stuffed animal that was a rabbit before, and that is all. But Oliver didn't care. Peace and quiet was what he wanted, and his meals on time. Life, however, cannot always be like that. One day, Miss Tilly called him from the kitchenette. "Kitty, kitty," she called, "come here. I have a surprise for you." "Meow," replied Oliver, and he hurried to the kitchenette, expecting to find dinner served in its usual place under the sink. But it wasn't dinner this time. Miss Tilly really did have a surprise for him. She was smiling at something she held in her two cupped hands. It was small and white and furry. "What do you think of this, Oliver?" she said. "Its name is Marshmallow." She held the furry thing to her cheek for a moment as though it were very nice indeed, and then she set it down on the floor. It had tall pink ears, a wiggly nose, and twitchy little whiskers, and to Oliver's dismay, it was alive. Oliver was appalled. Appalled means shocked in a very bad, negative way. He did not like what he was seeing. He took one wild look at the creature, squinched his eyes tight shut as if he couldn't bear the sight of it. "Oliver, what is the matter with you?" asked Miss Tilly. "Don't tell me you're afraid of a little tiny baby bunny." But Oliver was afraid. He was too frightened even to run away, but crouched in a corner of the kitchenette, opening and closing his eyes as if it actually hurt them to look at the rabbit. As for Marshmallow, he paid no attention to anybody. He was a very unhappy little bunny. All he wanted was to be at home again with his nice, warm, furry mother. If he had been a kitten, he would have mewed. If he had been a puppy, he would have howled. And if he had been a baby, he would have cried his eyes out. But being a bunny, he just sat still and felt sad. However, he cheered up a little bit when he had his dinner, a raw carrot with its green top and a bowl of rolled oats. Dry, not cooked, the way people like them. The bowl said D-O-G on it. You know what that says? Dog. For the shop where Miss Tilly had bought Marshmallow did not have any dishes with R-A-B-B-I-T, rabbit, or B-U-N-N-Y, bunny, on them. But as Marshmallow couldn't read, it didn't matter much. He ate the green carrot top first, for he was thirsty. Then he munched part of the carrot, and after that he tried the rolled oats, eating with little quick nibbles, crunch, 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 and with his front paws in the dish. When he'd finished eating, he hopped into the bowl and took a nap. That night, Marshmallow slept in the bathroom. Miss Tilly made him a bed out of a folded towel so he would be comfortable, but it was not the same as having a soft, furry mother to cuddle against. Still, he did not cry. Nor did he yowl for his breakfast the next morning. "If only you were nice and quiet like that, Oliver," said Miss Tilly, when Oliver woke her, as he always did, with frantic scratching and meowing at her bedroom door. He was even earlier than usual this morning because he was so excited over having a new animal in the house. Miss Tilly warmed some chopped beef for him, gave Marshmallow another carrot, and made herself some coffee and some toast. And then she sat down at her typewriter and wrote. Do you know what a typewriter is? So a typewriter is a very old-fashioned machine that was used to write things. So today people, instead of using a typewriter, use a computer, and they type words into a computer, and then they can print them. You've seen me do that in our classroom a lot of times, and probably someone in your house has printed something before. That's how we do things now. But in these days, which was quite a while ago, there was a machine that only typed words onto papers. And then the words would be on the papers, and then you would have to, if you wanted to make more than one copy, you would take that and copy it somewhere else. But it wasn't like a computer. It didn't do anything else except for type words. So the paper would go into the machine, and you could turn a little handle, or when more time had gone by, they could plug in and you could push a button and it would pull the paper up. And then you would type the letters one at a time. And the old ones, where you'd have to turn with your hand to get the paper up, had little tiny stamps, tiny, tiny stamps, and an ink ribbon. So instead of an ink pad, like we have in our classroom where you can stamp things onto paper, we stamped some letters and some pictures. In the old days, it would stamp little tiny, tiny letters one at a time. So you would type words out of these tiny, tiny letter stamps by punching the keys, by touching the keyboard, and it would put it on the paper. So that's a typewriter. So Miss Tilly sat down with her coffee and her toast to use a typewriter, and here's what she wrote. A poem in praise of rabbits. And praise means saying all the good things to and about the rabbit. A bunny is a quiet pet. A bunny is the best thing yet. A bunny never makes a sound. A bunny's nice to have around. Puppies whimper, bark, and growl. Kittens mew, and tomcats yow. Birdies twitter, chirp, and tweet. Moo cows moo, and lambkins bleat. Some creatures bellow, others bray. Some hoot or honk or yap or neigh. Most creatures make annoying sounds, even little girls and boyses. A boy, though, is never heard. A bunny, though, is never heard. He simply never says a word. A bunny's a delightful habit. No one's home's complete without a rabbit. That morning, Oliver felt much braver. He hardly squinched his eyes at all when he looked at the bunny now, and by afternoon, he was watching Marshmallow with an expression that would have frozen the blood of an older and wiser rabbit, meaning that would be really, really scary to lots of other animals if they had the cat looking at them the way Oliver was looking at the bunny. Marshmallow, however, was a very young rabbit, so young that he barely noticed what went on around him. He was like a tiny new baby that cannot yet focus its eyes. He ate when he was hungry, and the rest of the time he slept with his paws tucked under him and his keeping them warm. He certainly didn't act very dangerous, and presently Oliver grew bolder, meaning braver. He began creeping toward the sleeping bunny, eyes glaring wickedly. But just as he lashed his tail and got ready to spring, Miss Tilly cried, "Oliver, don't you dare hurt that bunny." Oliver sat up, blinking innocently as if to say, "Why, Miss Tilly, what an idea! I wouldn't dream of such a thing." But Miss Tilly was not so sure. "This just isn't going to work out," she said. "Cats always have hunted rabbits, and I suppose they always will." She put Oliver in the other room, and after that, she didn't let him come anywhere near Marshmallow. Soon Marshmallow began to notice more, just as any baby does as it grows up. He went lolloping about the apartment, sniffing things and tasting them, and nearly everything seemed to taste pretty good. He nibbled the rugs, working very hard in one place until he gnawed a little bare spot before he moved to another place. He stood on his hind legs and yanked his boots out of the bookcase. He chewed the chair and table legs, and every time Miss Tilly sat down for a moment, he came hopping up cheerfully to untie her shoelaces. He was very busy. Marshmallow was the only live rabbit Miss Tilly had ever known personally, and she was surprised to find that he nibbled so many things besides carrots. She wrote another poem on her typewriter, which she called "A Solemn Warning to Rabbit Lovers." Solemn means quiet and very, very serious. A bunny nibbles all day long. A bunny doesn't think it's wrong. He nibbles mittens, mufflers, mops. He only pauses when he hops. He nibbles curtains, lamp cords, shoes. He only stops to take a snooze. Sofa pillows, ribbons, rugs. He takes a mouthful and then he tugs. Galoshes, boxes, books, and string. A bunny nibbles everything. Whenever Miss Tilly went out, she left the two animals in separate rooms because she didn't trust Oliver. One afternoon, she stayed out later than usual, and when Oliver woke from his nap, there was no dinner waiting for him under the sink. He thought he'd better remind her about it, so he trotted to the door of the room and said, "Wow!" There was no answer, but he could hear odd sounds in the next room, small scuffling noises that caused his eyes to whiten, his ears to point suddenly forward. These sounds were made by Marshmallow's little feet as he went lippity, lippity, lippity around the room, skidding every now and then and slipping on the hardwood floor. Marshmallow was feeling happy. He had eaten all the carrot he wanted and quite a lot of new magazines that Miss Tilly had left on the floor when she went out, and he had discovered her old plush Easter bunny on the sofa. So what do you think he did when he found that stuffed animal, the bunny? Remember, bunnies nibble everything. He thoroughly, which means completely, nibbled the rabbit's whiskers. Now he was just frolicking about the room, which means he was just jumping and playing throughout the room, skidding merrily on the smooth floor and kicking up his heels for sheer joy of being alive. On the other side of the door, Oliver was listening and sniffing and listening while his eyes got bigger and bigger. "Meow," he said again and scratched impatiently at the door. When this didn't do any good, he stood up on his hind legs and patted on the doorknob. Finally, he reached up with both of his front paws, and with one on each side of the knob, he worked it this way and that way and this, and at last there was a click, and the door swung open, and Oliver padded silently into the next room. And there was that rabbit, skipping about as if he hadn't had a care in the world. He didn't see Oliver come in, but went on playing a little game he had just, in that moment, thought of. He would dash several feet in one direction, stop suddenly, spring into the air, then he'd turn, dash back to his starting point, jump again, back and forth, back and forth. It was a very happy, pretty sight. Oliver watched it with great interest. Each time the little rabbit whisked by him, he lashed his tail and got ready to spring. But somehow he couldn't quite make up his mind to do it. Perhaps he remembered that Miss Tilly had told him not to hurt the bunny. Or perhaps he was still just a little bit afraid. Suddenly, Marshmallow sat up tall and stared at the cat, his soft nose twitching rapidly. He looked most inquisitive which means that he has a question in his mind. Probably lots of questions about what Oliver's thinking and what he might do. But he didn't look scared or alarmed. Alarmed means afraid. What was this great striped animal, he wondered? Could it possibly be his mother in a new fur coat? And while Oliver hesitated, which means he didn't get too close to Marshmallow, trying to make up his mind to pounce, all at once Marshmallow scampered joyfully up to him and kissed him right on the nose. Oliver flinched and drew back, aghast. That's what aghast means. If someone does something and you're shocked and surprised, you're aghast. And you might say, Then curiosity overcame his fear. Being curious about something means you have questions that you want to figure out the answers to. Oliver has questions about this little marshmallow, and now he's curious and wants to find out the answers about his questions. He sniffed the bunny eagerly. Marshmallow shut his eyes and snuggled close, blissfully happy to have found another furry animal. If this were not his mother, it must at least be a very close relation. Even when Oliver opened his jaws and took hold of him with his teeth, Marshmallow still wasn't afraid. He just lay still, and the next moment Oliver had let go and was licking his face as tenderly as any mother cat would with her kitten. And like any mother cat, he licked the fur in the wrong direction so it stood on end and looked all messed up. But Marshmallow didn't mind. He was so happy to have a mother's care at last. When Miss Tilly got home, she found them asleep on the floor, Oliver's head resting upon Marshmallow as though he were a little white fur pillow. After that, she let him play together every day, for she saw that they were friends. They romped like two kittens, and whenever the cat went, Marshmallow followed it, lippity-lippity right at his heels. And whenever Oliver lay down to take a nap, the bunny cuddled up next to him as close as he could get. He could barely have loved Oliver more if he had been his mother. Oliver forgot that he had ever thought of Marshmallow as a strange animal to be pounced upon. He adopted the little bunny and brought him up as his own kitten, often scrubbing him so thoroughly, which means, again, so completely, that his fur stood up on end for hours. And although Oliver never said so, I cannot help thinking that in time he came to agree with Miss Tilly that a bunny's a delightful habit, no home's complete without a rabbit. Brighten your home with a bunny. He's fat, he's frisky, he's funny. He's soft, he's downy, he's cute, he's clowny. Oh, brighten your home with a bunny. So again, it's springtime. And if you look really closely when you're out riding your bike or taking a walk, you will see little bunnies hopping around, because now's the time when all the little baby bunnies have been born and grown up enough to start to come out a little bit of their nests. Most of the time the moms are still keeping them in their nests and bringing them food. But if you look closely, you might see some mother or maybe father bunnies hopping around, and baby bunnies will start to come out too, now that everything is warmed up. So keep that in mind. This was a long book, so I chose not to do a poem today. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.